Welcome to the Builders Podcast, episode 107. Darrell Evans, 30 years of entrepreneurship, leveraging email to stay top of mind and creating value. Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable from the trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another The Builders. Today we are joined by Darrell Evans. Darrell is the founder of MindShift Business Coaching. He is a serial entrepreneur. I'm looking at his bio now. Investor and co-founder of, local internet marketing. He has and his team have helped entrepreneurs and companies generate over $300 million in revenue, and he's been online since 2011. He's personally started and operated 6 businesses since the age of 20, which is awesome. So obviously he's got a little bit of experience. Welcome to the show, Darrell.
Well, Matt, thanks for having me on the show, Matt. I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
Yeah, awesome. And we will have no technical problems anymore during this whole thing. Anyway, so no, it's great to have you. You have a lot of great experience, and I think this is going to be a great discussion. I'm stoked always excited to talk to somebody that's been in business for real. You know, some really good businesses, and so it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. But on the Builders, where we usually start, especially the first time we talk to you, is because I know you're going to be a comeback guest over the years. You know,
hopefully,
always drop that.
Hopefully, I say something good enough that you'll want me back. That'll be cool.
We'll want you back. Some people come back like right away. They're like, "Hey, can we have a second one?" But no, we always start with your story. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, how you became an entrepreneur, who influenced you, what influenced you, why you are the awesome person you are today doing what you're doing.
Wow. So yeah, again, thanks, Matt, for having me on the show. I've been an entrepreneur for 32 years now. So telling this story, I'd like to try to condense it into a couple of segments of that journey. And it starts actually with, people always ask me, well, what prompted the entrepreneurial bug? And I always say, I make jokes. I used to go to the grocery store with my mom. And ironically, I didn't really want to go to the grocery store, but I wanted to read the magazines that were at the magazine rack. I was always interested in Entrepreneur, Forbes, Inc., Business Opportunity magazines, even though I was an athlete. And I was very intrigued by electrical things. Back then it was walkie-talkies, and this is all before cell phones. Sorry, folks, I'm 53 this year. So walkie-talkies and remote control cars and things of that nature. Everything wasn't virtual. But my eyes were always drifting towards the business stuff. At the same time, Matt, I was an employee at Taco Bell, which in the United States, very popular restaurant. I went from being a fry cook to an assistant manager in a year or a year and a half. And then I was in college and became a general manager. So I decided to hang up my sports playing days after I knew I wasn't going pro. And I was in engineering in college, but I'm also now running this restaurant at 20 years old, $800 and something thousand a year restaurant. So it wasn't one of the biggest restaurants in the network. There were, I think, 18 in the network locally. We were certainly one of the smaller ones at the time. Mm-hmm. But 20-year-old, $800,000 a year restaurant, and I'm in college. But it was at that time that I started my first business out of the trunk of my car, selling sportswear, hats, T-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, all the things you can think of. And I started selling them out of the trunk of my car on Saturday and Sunday at a swap meet. And that was to help fund my college and sort of put my first taste of entrepreneurship in it. And I really that probably really wasn't a business. It was more like a side hustle, but it was a profitable side hustle, right?
How'd you come up, to cut you off, well, how'd you come up with that idea? Did you just,
Yeah, I love sports. It was natural. Like if you catch me outside of a business function, I've got sportswear on. That's just my jam. I don't get caught up in, that's just what I wear. Sweatshirts, hoodies, T-shirts. Yeah. I'm an athlete at heart. I'm still an athlete. I still work out. And so that just was something that just felt natural for me.
And you knew about this opportunity, and you're like, this is what I could sell there. And
I saw it in one of the books. Yeah. I saw it in one of the business opportunity books, and I found a vendor, and I said, well, let me just send them a check. By the way, y'all, we used to send checks back in the day. Yes. I sent them a check, and I was, and I just believed that if I sent the check and waited 3 or 4 weeks, whatever the product would take, it would get here. It wasn't Amazon Prime, y'all. Let me be clear. You waited weeks to get the product, right? Yeah. So lo and behold, the boxes showed up with stuff in them. Nice. And I think I knew a little bit about marketing because I only sold the most popular stuff, whether I liked it or not. So I sold the Cowboys and I sold the Pittsburgh Steelers back at that time. I sold the big names, the Raiders. I didn't sell stuff that wasn't popular. Wasn't because I didn't want to carry everything, but I carried what people most likely were going to buy. Right. And I was, of course, growing up in Las Vegas. I was a Lakers. We didn't have sports back then in Vegas. We didn't have professional sports the way it's popping off now. So we didn't have a sports team here. So I was a Lakers, Dodgers, Rams fan. So clearly I carried all the 3 LAs. Of course, we later know that the Rams went to St. Louis and, of course, have come back. But I was a diehard fan for those teams. And so I carried all the teams that were popular. And that's probably what made things work because I always had inventory that was coming off the shelf, if you will, because they were already popular teams. Right. I didn't care for the Cowboys or the other teams, but people did. So I sold what everybody was buying. Fast forward to college days. I get out of college 1996. I'd also started in real estate by that time. So I kind of hung up the commerce thing. I'm still at Taco Bell, by the way, as a general manager, getting tons of experience with management, P&L, top line, bottom line, expenses, hiring, training, empowerment, all of the things you can think of running a restaurant. And that just further fueled this idea of entrepreneurship. Once I realized the model was, hey, I can do as much as I can to help grow this business, but I'm still up for a 4 or 5% increase every year. I'm like, there's got to be a better way. I started in real estate, got my real estate license, finished in college. I ended up pivoting from engineering to business, finance, got my degree in finance. And I entered the financial services world, which was sort of my third-ish business, if you will, by that time. So three stints of entrepreneurship before I even get out of college. Wow. But the big run for me happened around 2000 when I entered the mortgage industry. I'd liked the financial services model, but it didn't feel like my calling. So I hung that up and went back to the real estate world, which I still had a real estate license, which I just wasn't selling real estate. I didn't like being a real estate agent. It wasn't really my jam. And I went into the mortgage services world, and that became the big run up. So we had a great run up until what happened in 08, 09. And Matt, what happened was I started marketing online in 2003. And in 2003, I realized I found out about email marketing and automated drip systems. Then came a website. Then came this understanding that, people are shopping online. So I was an early adopter to the internet. In our mortgage company, we launched our first lead generation campaigns online 2006. And so that became SEO. I think I started my first YouTube channel 2007, where we would take frequently asked questions that our customers were asking us. We'd document those answers to the questions, put them on YouTube. And the reason we put them on YouTube was because I was busy. We had a practice that had, 30 to 50 loan applications every month, and as well as what was in process. I couldn't be available for everybody. I did have a team, but everybody wanted me because I was the brand. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way than answering the same question 1,000 times. They all matter to the individual who needs the answer, but I don't have to deliver it one-on-one, which started to give me this understanding of how to scale digital. So the YouTube channel became the drop shop, if you will. Whenever I was tied up, my team would just say, hey, by the way, Darrell's going to meet with you at 3:00, but be sure to check out our YouTube channel. He has answered a lot of the most frequently asked questions about the home loan process. And I think you're going to get a lot of value out of it. By the time they got to my meeting, they were locked and loaded, ready to buy, right? So nice. It became clear to me that digital was about to change the game. And so when the market crashed, it gave me a chance to pivot my mindset and say, who else doesn't know about this? Because I don't want to say I'm crushing it, but I'm crushing it comparatively. And I'm like, nobody seems to know what the heck is going on with the internet. And so I started consulting 2008, 9, probably more 9, 10, met my former business partner with the agency, but we started the agency 2011. And we started helping small, mid-sized companies grow through the recession. And we've been doing that now for the last 12 years, very successfully. My former business partner decided to leave the agency recently. And so now it's just me running the ship, and we are changing the agency right now in the current dynamics of the digital wins. But we've been, to your point earlier, we've been relatively successful helping companies grow. We haven't gotten it all right, but we've had a pretty good run with clients over the last 12 years, and we're excited for the next run.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a good story. You got it well pinned, like condensed. I was engaged the whole time.
That felt long.
I love it.
That felt long. I felt like I was long-winded.
like wow. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you like that. You were on a roll. So no, it's awesome. And I love that you said 2003 you started doing going online and doing stuff. Or figuring out, what did you do in 2003?
Email.
Yeah. The email stuff.
The first thing I did was, part of the reason before YouTube is I wrote out a lot of the questions. I just didn't have YouTube. I wrote out the questions and put them in a 52-week drip sequence.
Nice.
So if someone came to me, it was never urgent for someone to buy a house or get a mortgage that day, even if it was a refinance and mortgage rates were falling or whatever the case was. It was never, ever urgent for the vast majority of people. So I realized from my days in real estate earlier, from my days in financial services, that you've got to stay top of mind. You've got to stay relevant, even when it's not time to buy. So the question was, how could I be a resource? That was the phrase. I've been using it for decades now. How can I be a resource even when they're not ready to buy? Well, then comes email. And I'm like, hey, perfect example I always use is one of my niches back then was VA home loans back then. Someone would be transferring to Nellis Air Force Base, which is the Air Force Base in my backyard in Vegas. And they were getting orders, let's say, from Sam Houston. I think Sam Houston is an Air Force Base in Texas. Well, they would get the orders 10 months in advance. So let's say they're getting it in February. They're going to be here in November or December. Well, they don't need to buy a house yet, but they want to get the information. How do they use the VA loan? What are the prices like? What are the rates like? What are blah, 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 blah. Well, I don't want to be on a call with them every day answering those questions. They know that they don't need the mortgage today. It doesn't make sense for us to run credit and run a loan app and all that stuff. We do need to ask some general questions to see if they qualify. And they want to understand the process if they were a first-time home buyer, let's say. And so I just documented all that stuff and put it in email. So if you came into my world, even to this day, if you come in my world, you're going to hear from me every week. To this day, I've still been teaching that. Nothing's changed. If you come into my world and you get on my email list, you're going to hear from me every week. It isn't hear from me every week so you can buy something. It's what can I add value in your world and what can I do to stay top of mind in case there's a day when you might need my help. So I've always had that philosophy. And so I put it into a 52-week drip sequence after they met with me for the first time. And it worked really, really well. And it still works really, really well today. I got an email I think I got an email in November or December, Matt. We're recording this in February. A guy emailed me from 2015. Mm-hmm. He had the email that I emailed him in 2015. He forwarded me the email and said, Darrell, I'm finally ready.
No kidding.
No
That's
joke.
awesome.
Why did he get the email from 2015? Well, because what I said to him in that email, he bookmarked and he kept it. And, so it's I always say business growth is a game of perseverance, but it's also a game of patience. And I think we don't realize that every person who came into our world to inquire about the thing that we sell, 50% of them are likely going to buy it. You just don't know when. And so when you don't make enough sales, it's because you weren't around when they needed it. You might have been around when they inquired about it, but then you didn't do a good enough job to stay there when they needed it. And that's the impatience I find with digital. And we can maybe get into this, and get into other types of business building concepts, but it is the simplest thing to do, Matt. Everybody can do it. Everybody can have an email system, but most people fail in the discipline of delivering something of value 52 weeks a year and then 52 weeks next year. And here's the secret, Matt. Everybody's not going to open your emails, and that's okay. Which means you don't have to write unique content 52 weeks every year. You recycle the content the next year. Update it for what's new and relevant. You don't have to sit down and write 50 new pieces of things every year. You recycle. You update, you go back and look at what's in your cadence. You say, what's new about that topic this year that wasn't relevant last year? Send out the same email. Couple of tweaks. SEO don't change. SEO, the process of SEO hasn't changed in 12 years. But what just changed recently is Google made an update. So now I edit that email to address the update that just happened in December on this year's email. Does it make sense?
Interesting. Yeah, that makes actually a lot of sense. That's
Let me be clear. I'm lazy, Matt. I'm very lazy. Let me be clear. I'm not going to work any harder than I have to and try to recreate the wheel. I look at my open rates. My open rates are about 25 to 30% on my distribution, which is it's not great, certainly not horrible. One of our clients runs at 60%, 70% open rates. So I feel like I've got a ways to go, but I've been doing this a long time. But if I know that only 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 are going to open the email, did they see the email anyway? They didn't even see 75% of my emails. So we have to simplify marketing to the point of doing the thing consistently without overwhelm. And the vast majority of people didn't even see your first message or your second one or your...
That's right. Well, so this is all. So there's so much you're putting so much out there that I want to dig into.
Let's go.
But this is all a numbers game, right? So you're in this actually can be also applied to like social media or whatever. That not everyone's going to see every piece of content.
Yep.
But you do it consistently on social media. My agency, we try to put content out every day. We do this podcast. We do other things. And with the knowledge, knowing that not every person that's following us is going to see that every day, or they're going to be in a position to be at the top of their inbox just at that moment when my email hits or our post hits. They log into LinkedIn. It's like right at the moment right when our piece of content just landed. But that doesn't happen. But some of them do. Right.
That's right.
So, and when you said top of mind, that's part of this whole gig as well, is staying top of mind. So when they are ready to engage with you, or they see something in that moment, they might have seen a dozen pieces of content or emails, or 100 before they are at that moment, they're ready to reach out to you. So
that's right.
Yeah, it's cool. But I go back. So I don't know. I can't remember if we talked about this in our, when we talked on our intro call or anything like that, but I go back 20 years to the year as well. That's why 2003 really rang a bell, because that's when I actually entered the internet space.
Yeah.
And
I remember your OG from our first call. We're like, that's what we shared. Like we've been in this game for a minute.
Yeah. It's been a little while. And I came in insurance. You were doing mortgages. I had an insurance website, was my first website.
That. Yep.
And it kind of, in some ways, I wish I would have figured out how to leverage that more and stay with insurance instead of getting sucked into affiliate marketing and everything else I did. But I had fun. But yeah, it's and email was a big part, was one of the things I learned a lot about back in the early days. Even back then, email was even bigger in those days, right? It's still a thing, but back then there wasn't social media and all that stuff, right. And it was like email was the thing.
It was,
and so learning how to use autoresponders and drip emails and stuff was an art form. That hasn't left me either. I'm not very good at it today, though. I'm good at it in terms of I know what to do, but the time to do it, Matt has not made enough time to do it. So maybe you're inspiring me today to do more. One of the things I think that one of the mental things you throw out the 52 weeks, and one of the things, and I'm curious how you approach this. Do you write, like if you are advising somebody to build like you're doing here, to build out a campaign of 52 emails, even though you're lazy and you're going to recycle those, you have to write them initially.
You do.
Do you write them? Do you sit down and write all 52 at once, or do you do like I tend to do and write maybe 10, and maybe they're every 2 weeks for a while until you write some more, and then you get to that 52 and you just kind of slowly build it out over time?
Yeah. I try to keep it as I always advise that a client do what's in their best capability, right? Not everyone is a writer, and I respect that and I acknowledge that. I have built the skill. I didn't come out of the womb a writer. I've yet to write a book. That is still on my bucket list. I believe I've got 3 in me, but I have not encountered that endeavor, so I can't speak to that yet. What I am good at is writing web copy, email copy. I'm good at writing answers that are in my head that would have come out of my mouth. See, if I would have said it, I should write it. See, so I keep it simple. The way I just taught this class a week ago, Matt, and I'll just share with your audience. So here's the fastest, easiest way to come up with content, whether it's for social, email, or what have you, is sit down and write down the top 10 to 20 frequently asked questions that your customers ask you as they're inquiring about your product or service. Then write the questions they ask you during the delivery of your product and service. And then there's some questions that they'll ask in the support world of your product or service. I call it the before, the during, and the after. So what are they asking you before they become your customer? What are they asking you while you're in the delivery of the product or service as your customer or client? And then what are they asking later on? Like, what other needs do they have? For example, Matt, you build websites. You've been building websites for 20 years. But what else are they asking you about after the site's done? Are they asking you about social? Are they asking you about those? So there's 30 to 50 questions right there if you really think about it. Now, to your point of how do you write them? Well, you write them the way you want to write them. Today, everybody can either speak with their mouth, which they're going to do with their customer anyway. So you and I are on a podcast. Well, you don't even have to get that fancy. You can literally sit down with your phone and speak into the voice notes the answers to the question. So you look at the question. Let me get one that comes up in my world. It's a bad question, but people do ask it. How fast does it take to rank on the first page of Google? It's a terrible question. It's a bad answer. It's a bad question, can't be answered shortly. But I could sit down literally and say, one of the frequently asked questions I get is, how fast can we rank on the first page of Google? Well, the answer is it depends. And I know that answer sucks. But here's the fact of the matter. Google's looking for relevant content that is qualified, ranked, etc. And I can finish the question in 1 minute. What I can then do is take that video or that audio and transcribe it with a service like Otter or all these different services. And now the audio transcription is in your hand. You can do some quick edits to it. Boom. Now you have an email. Put it into your autoresponder. You're done. So anybody can do that. Everybody can do that because almost everybody was going to speak to that person about that question anyway. So don't overcomplicate writing. There's a different craft and art to a blog post. This is not that. This is how do you stay top of mind with a question that they would have asked you anyway. And if they came into your world, you should assume that they're going to have it at some point. And I always advocate that it's better that you give them the answer before your competitor does.
Yeah,
it's true. Better that you give them the answer before your competitor does. And the issue is if you give them an answer to all their questions, when it does come time for them to buy, you're going to be the authority and there won't be a competitor. They won't go looking for anybody.
You said authority right when I was thinking authority.
Yeah.
We're in tune.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what you're doing. You're building authority by talking to them and answering these questions for them. So naturally, if they have another question or you become the expert they want to come to.
And the key is, some people ask me, Darrell, I don't have time to answer questions. So if I send the question out, what if they have another question? What if they get the email and then they have a question that's not what if they have another question? That's called engaging in a dialogue.
Yeah.
If you met them at a networking event and you told them what you did and they told you what, et cetera, that's called engaging in a dialogue. Wouldn't you answer the next question if they asked you a second question after the first question? Of course you would. So engage in a dialogue. It seems like everybody today, not everybody, seems like there's a chunk of entrepreneurs today that once they get online, they want it all to happen in a digital mechanism. You know what I do? I give out my email address to all my leads. If you come into my world, you get my personal email address. I invite you to write back in any email. I invite you to ask a question. Well, Darrell, you charge $1,500 to have a consultation. Why would you then give them a free consultation through an email? You misunderstand. That's not a consultation in an email. That's me answering a question,
right? Which
could lead to a consultation. Everybody wants to run straight to the checkout line or the checkout link, right? To get paid for your advice. And I get it. You've earned it. I just said this to one of my coaching clients yesterday. There's a difference between mentorship, answering questions, coaching, and advising, in my mind. And there is a time when you should ask for proper payment for the engagement. But answering an email is not one of those.
Yeah.
It's not one of those, right? So your job is to be helpful. And again, if we're a professional and we're, if we're trying to be a helpful resource, show that we're an expert at what we do, build authority, gain trust, and be the person they choose or product they choose or service they choose, then let's do that. And everything else will fall by its wayside, right? I mean, I grew up and I learned early days from a man by the name of Zig Ziglar, who's since passed away, one of the most prolific teachers in my time. And he had a very simple phrase. Everybody's heard it. It's kind of cliche, but I live by it. And it didn't originate from Zig. It came out of the Bible, if we're really going to get crystal clear about it, right? Help enough other people get what they want, and you'll ultimately get everything that you want. It doesn't mean help enough people get what they want after they pay you, and then you'll get everything you want. No, that's not what the quote says. So there's a scarcity mindset that seems to come along in some cases when people do digital marketing. I can't do it anymore on my social channels. One of my social channels, a couple of my channels have very little engagement, but one of them gets a lot of engagement. I can't keep up with the comments. On Facebook, I can't keep up. I actually borderline get overwhelmed because I feel semi-obligated that if they took time out of their day to write me a comment, I feel a little bit of burden to reply. And in some days it's 20, some days it's 12, some days it's 47. And I only log in at night at 8 o'clock, 8:30 and check to see how much engagement. And it's like some days it gets overwhelming. Now that's probably an undue burden that I'm putting on myself. I don't think they all care if I comment, but I feel a little bit of an obligation that if I shared something that moved them to write me something. It's a balancing act. But again, the goal here is let's just share abundantly and be a helpful resource. And one of my core mottos, Matt, is positively impact lives. That's what's my mission. If I ended it all, I would want someone to say, he helped me in some way. He positively impacted me when we had our interaction. That's my goal. If it leads to commerce at some point, great. If it doesn't, great. Leads to us to having a great cup of coffee or a breakfast or a dinner, fantastic. Commerce is not my entire life. And so it can I be a resource? If so, and if not, I'll refer you to someone who I think could help you in your situation.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, that's awesome. At the end of the day, we're here to help people. And sometimes it's just one reply to a comment that helps somebody and steered them in the right direction. And that could have this ripple effect and really improve their lives. Other times you have to have that full consultation and really engage with them. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are shy to give away all their secrets, give away all their, this is a common thing on the web. You hear people are fearful of, why would I give away all my secrets up front and make all this content posts, or even in your emails and stuff, you're giving away all this stuff. But that just, I think people also, those are little pieces and they're not contextual always to that particular person. Maybe it's in the neighborhood, but I think really where the value then eventually comes it depends on what your model is and if you're consulting or whatever. But like for me, for example, in doing web design development, we have a lot of obviously posts about web design and development and pain points where, we try to weave all that into our content. But at the end of the day, somebody's going to want to actually talk to us and take that next step, because you might have all this stuff out there. You might have ebooks, you might have reports, you might have blog posts, you might have all this stuff, but everyone's not going to go out on the web and find all your stuff. They want to just talk to you and you tell them what they need in their context. So I think that's one of the things I try to think about as well is we have all these different things we're putting out there, but at the end of the day, they're going to want to talk to you because they don't want to sift through it all. They want to actually talk with you directly and ask you the questions that are relevant to them and what their pain points are. Because we know a lot of stuff and we put a lot of stuff out there, but until I actually talk to somebody and ask them the questions and figure out what their issues are and what we're trying to do for them. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's where it all kind of comes together. But yet, like I said, it's not, again, it comes down to a numbers game. You're putting all this out there. Some people it's just enough to see your content and that gives them what they need, or something you wrote, gives them everything they need. But at the same time, there's that percentage that want to take it a step further and talk to you. And it's just that funnel. Right?
Yeah. I simplified to say now I've got enough at bats in the professional services world to know the vast majority of people are not do-it-yourselfers.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just not.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah.
They're just not.
Right.
So the fact of the matter is the most successful people on the planet outsource or have teams of experts around them, right? Does no one here listening, everyone knows Henry Ford's story. No, Henry Ford, if you really understand, he didn't know half of the stuff it took to build a car. He put people around him, right? And so the vast majority of our clients who come to you, the vast majority of clients who come to us, they don't want a solution that they can do it themselves. They want to know that they want to know you've got a process, right? They can Google the what. Yeah. They're buying your how, right?
Right.
They can Google the what. None of the what is secret. I mean, even the word secret. Like, I don't use the word secret. I have a process that you don't have. I have a process that you don't have. If you want my process, I'll share the process. But just because I give you the recipe to the cake doesn't mean you're going to make the cake taste like my cake. So it's not the what. The what is Googleable in the vast. Now there's some formulaic things that we do that are not Googleable, which is where which is where we make our money. That's why you would choose us versus someone else. And we can talk to you about the formulaic pieces. And if you agree with how we think about those pieces, then maybe it makes us more attractive. However, the vast majority of what is Googleable. YouTubeable.
Yeah.
It's on somebody's webinar.
Right. But again, it's like, you're highlighting your experience. You could have a 10 steps on how to do something and somebody sees that, like, that's great. Can you do it for us? I'm glad you know how to do it, but can you do that for us? Because I don't have the time or plus you're bringing to the table the skills. Like I said, you have your processes, you have your team or whatever. That's what they're also leveraging. I give a very recent example this morning, even a client that they have an established business. They do coaching and membership, all this stuff, and they're asking for my help with their Google Analytics. They have Google Analytics installed, but they aren't confident that it's tracking everything that needs to be tracked, and they want to do maybe some advanced stuff. And they're coming to me to, number one, advise them, but also implement that. So I'm taking that off their plate. They could go out and try to figure it out, and especially converting over to this new thing that Google's got, GA4. So all that is something they could do, but it's better that they spend time on the things that they actually adds more value for them, or they're equipped to do, and we'll just take that off their plate. But again, I could point them to an article that says, this is how you set it up. You can go do it yourself.
But for the do-it-yourselfers, that's where coaching comes in, because inevitably they'll do it themselves. They'll run into a problem. That's where coaching comes in, right? When I coach people, they do it themselves. They just want to make sure that when they do it themselves, they don't start with a blank slate. And then when they run into the inevitable roadblock, hurdle, or what have you, when they followed your formula and then it didn't quite come out the way you discussed it, you're helping them ease their pain of frustration, anxiety, worry, or concern. Like coaching does, coaching done right, if you offer that, solves 7 emotional problems. It's for no other reason, in my opinion. It's to help the person that wants the result, who is ready to execute it in their business, a plan, a process, a procedure, whatever it may be. My job as a coach, every week when I show up, is to make sure I alleviate worry, frustration, fear, concern, doubt, right? And there's one more that's losing my mind. There's 6 of them. Fear, worry, doubt, frustration, anger. And make sure they're not angry about, right? I'm pulling people off of those emotions. That's the coach's job, is to help them through that emotion, because they are journeying down a path that's not their expertise, but they know they need to do it. Maybe they can't afford to hire you to build a website. Maybe they can't afford to hire an agency like mine to take over all the traffic, the lead gen, and the conversion process. And that's okay. But if you want coaching, that means you're going to run into those problems because this ain't what you do.
Right.
This isn't what you do. So my job as a coach is to make sure you get through those pockets of emotion that will tell you it's not going to work, or I'm not good enough, or all that self-talk.
Yeah, it's actually, I lean into one of those even in my copy on my web design site is the stress aspect of it. It's one of the 100%. Things in my messaging because we partner with other agencies and stuff, and one of the things that I figured out over the years is the stress that occurs when they either have a team they're trying to build in-house, or like a web development or design team. They don't know how to manage a creative team, or they've tried to outsource and that's failed for a variety of reasons. They got all this stress when they should be working on other parts of their business. So part of my messaging is, we'll relieve that stress. Let us come in. Let's talk about how we can structure this or help you and solve this problem so you don't have to worry about it. It's just, I'll take care of that. You go out and do your sales or working on your marketing or helping other teams, and we'll handle that. So it's kind of that same thing as finding those pain points and mapping it to some issue that can occur from that. Yeah. Okay. So this is awesome. So I just wanted to just one more thing about emails, like we went into this. I feel like we could have many conversations, so I'm hoping this won't be your last.
Yeah, we stayed in this channel of email, and email is a great topic for me. It's one of the topics I lead with all of my clients. Customers come to us typically, and you've seen it, Matt. You've been building websites for a couple of decades now. You know that you come across these businesses that have these great branded websites, and if they've got customers, the fastest way to scale their growth online is through their email. So yeah, let's keep talking about email. We can certainly come back and talk about other stuff.
Yeah. Well, so I wanted to, one thing we were talking about is actually writing of them. And that's something that I think, I like you, I've been doing this a long time. I can sit down. It actually drives my VA, my virtual assistant, a little nuts because she likes to know things ahead of time. But often when I do a blog post, I don't know it ahead of time. I just sit down and write it. So I can't even tell her what the topic's going to be sometimes on things we do. So she's learned to deal with it. But even like, when I do like solo episodes of podcasts or something, sometimes I don't know until an hour before. But so it's easy for us. But one of the things that I learned early on, and I am not going to remember it was some kind of program, coaching program or something like that. And they talked about, they taught conversational writing, basically. I don't know if that's exactly what they called it, but it was basically just writing like you talk on the internet. Yeah. And I learned how to do that, and it was a real game changer for me. I always liked writing. I did creative writing in college and whatever, blah, blah. But that was something where it's like, I don't need to create a perfect essay here or something I'm going to turn into my English teacher. That's perfect. The grammar's perfect. Everything's perfect. In fact, if you write even my social media sometimes, whatever, an email, I use, capitals sometimes, and I'll end with 3 dots, and I'll just do all kinds of, just like how I'm actually talking, and I pause, and I have some kind of way to pause, and I just talk like that. So like your advice to record a video, it's very similar. But if you can learn to do that while you're writing and just talk, just kind of, and then read it back. A lot of times write a couple paragraphs and then read it back out loud. Yeah. And does it sound like something you would say out loud? Those are great little tips to make it easier to, especially on the email side. It's very easy to do that. It's not like articles or blog posts and stuff. That's a great way to do it. Is that kind of how you approach it too?
I agree with you. I've always taken the approach that I'm not worried about the phonetics and all of the things that my head of content, so I used to have one of our head of content development and management in our agency for a 3-year period of time. She would not let me, and it sounds crazy, right? So I'm one of the founders of the company, and she wouldn't let me publish on social or send an email to our email list without it going by her first.
Well, it's good to have those people in your.
You need those people. You need those people, except that when they don't recognize the natural ebb and flow of your voice and your tone, and you can get too staunchy about that, right? So I believe I've always done well in marketing and my writing because I'm not trying to follow a formula. I'm not trying to follow a copywriting hack. I'm not trying to, I do understand the power of headlines and copywriting. I've studied all the advertising greats from the Claude Hopkins to the David Ogilvy's. I've studied them all, to the Dan Kennedys, all of it. But there is a balancing act between the science of emotional response and direct response and the native natural tone of how we speak. Again, if I go to you and meet you at a conference and we're having a casual conversation, what would I say to you standing in front of you? And I don't think that needs to be taught. It just needs to be allowed in the way that you produce your work. You write your blog posts through a conversational tone. That's not going to fly well for SEO. It's just not. It doesn't fly well for my SEO. But if I felt like saying it, I should say it and I should publish it because it mattered. That means this post isn't written for SEO, but this one over here might be. It takes a different style. It takes a different structure. Google's robots looking for a certain type of thing in that post. So I think it's a balancing act of content that you create. There is content that you need to do structurally for SEO purposes, and there's other things that it's important for thought leadership purposes. This podcast has an ebb and a flow to it. It's not structured. It's an ebb and a flow of two people, bouncing ideas and thoughts. And that needs to be a part of your marketing mix. Social, organic on your blog, how you speak in your brand, in your podcast, in your emails. I write all my emails. No one is allowed to send out, I found out for a while, no one is allowed to send my name on an email unless I write it. So if the company sends the email, it comes from the team. It says Team Yoka Local or something like that. But if Darrell at Yoka Local Marketing sends one, I wrote it. Yeah. And I want audience to know. I want the audience to differ between, and lately, as the market's been shifting with a lot of the buzz around AI, I've been writing a lot more emails in our agency to give my perspective because people want to know, what do you think? How's this going to affect? Right? And so I've been writing a lot of my content and a lot of my opportunity to give my perspective. And that's, some people would call that thought leadership, brand voice, expert thought, whatever. And I just think that needs to be a simplified message, right? Trust is not built just based on facts and good structure. It's built on opinion, expertise, things like, what's your perspective? What's your experience tell you based on this new discovery? What does your experience tell you based on how the market's trending? There's no right answer for whether this is or isn't a recession right now. On paper, there's some numbers that'll tell you whether it is or it isn't, but a recession is personal. As far as I'm concerned, a recession is personal. Inflation is personal, right? My chips, I make jokes all the time. I've been talking about this for a while since all these inflation numbers been popping off for the last 12 months. I eat Doritos. It's a bad habit, I know, but I eat Doritos regularly. The bag was $2.99 regularly. They were $2.99, and then as of late they're $4.70 something. Yeah, that's not 8%. No, that's not 8%, right? They said inflation was 8%. That's not 8%. That's not even 8% a month. But here's the point:
the bag shrinking too,
and the bag right. And my friend works at Frito-Lay and told me they shrink the bags, at least in Frito-Lay. They shrunk the bag by 12% too. So it's way more than most people know.
Right.
But that's not inflation to me. I've reached a place economically where that doesn't. Yeah. Am I happy that it's $4.70? No. Do I buy less of them? No. Why? Because I'm going to buy them. Right. Yeah. I went to another funny story. There's a fast food restaurant that a lot of people will know of. Perhaps I don't know if it's all around the country or not. But in any case, there's 3 items that our family gets when we go to this place once or twice a month. And it normally comes to $28. One day I showed up, it was $38. That's not 8%. So the point of the conversation is all of this stuff is opinion, relevance, and experiential. So in your writing, Is it a recession? Is it not a recession? It depends on where you're coming from. So it's trying to attack it from a couple different perspectives. What some people might think, and how do you address their concern there, and from others that are thriving. I'm on the opposite. Whenever there's a problem in the economy, we get more aggressive with marketing and advertising, because I know everybody's going to pull back their budgets because they're scared, because that's the human nature, is to conserve and be cautious because we don't know. The issue, though, is what I understand about supply and demand is that when supply increases, price goes down. So we leverage an arbitrage when people get scared. I'd hate to say it because Warren Buffett's famous for it, but when everyone's buying, you should be selling.
Right.
When everyone's selling, you should be buying. Why? Because you can't just do what the herd does and expect to get ahead. So I remember when the pandemic happened, we launched a massive ad campaign the very month that we got locked down. But you know why? Because I realized all the advertisers were going to be hoarding cash.
Yeah.
Guess what that meant? There's a lot more inventory available for cheap prices. So I love playing the leverage and arbitrage game when it's available. And of course, when it's not available, you pay higher prices like everybody else. Like right now, it is higher prices for everything. So anyway, a little bit off the topic of email, but in writing conversationally, I think that conversational writing should add your opinion, your experience to the topic, and how that comes out is how it comes out from your perspective. And I think that's what people find value in. People find value in your perspective.
Yeah, I think they connect with you more too, because your personality's coming out in it, and when it's coming from you, and it's and people will recognize that too a little easier. They'll get to know your style over time as well, and it's great stuff. Yeah, I want to start talking about the economy now. I was like,
my bad.
My wife and I, we when we go shopping, we recognize you have to get 2 cereal boxes now, because to get the same amount you got before, and all these things. And it's like, we still get the stuff though. But what I often have on the car ride home is I say, imagine the people though, right, that are in fixed incomes or that aren't in a position like us, how they're affected.
Yeah. That's and to that comment is part of the reason why I do what I do. Like, part of the reason I do what I do is, look, I started from nothing. I had a hard time before I started in the mortgage industry, I had a really tough personal life issue. I was living on my grandmother's couch. I know what it's like to start a business with no money in your pocket. I started the mortgage business with $200. And I know what it's like. I was living on my grandmother's couch, rest in peace, Nanny. She let me live on her couch. The reason why I had to live on her couch was because my mom was living there, and my great uncle, who was quadriplegic, was there, and he was bedridden. I just needed a place to lay my head while I figured out my life at that time.
Right.
So I know what it's like to start something from nothing. So I have tons of empathy for economic hardship. I have tons of empathy for life happening, bad things happening to good people. Like, that's something that I experienced in my own life. I never, we all wake up one day and find ourselves in some situation where, like, how did we end up here? Like, nobody woke up thinking they were ever going to go through this thing called a pandemic. We all woke up to that reality. I host a show called the MindShift podcast, and MindShift is a thought process. It's a formula for making peace with the facts, whatever those facts are, right? Your facts are your facts. That's why I said, a recession is personal. A recession to some is not a recession to others.
Right.
So you make peace with the facts. But number 2, where most people get stuck, the ones that are on fixed income, the ones that are maybe less forward, they haven't made step number 2 in the process, which is they haven't made a new decision about what to do to change their facts or to advance from those facts. I said it before, my agency, we lost 60% of our revenue when the pandemic happened. When lockdown happened, 60% of our revenue disappeared because we had clients that were deemed non-essential by the government. Yeah. There was nothing they could do. So we lost 60% of our business in 14 days. Those were the facts. My partner and I sat down and said, okay, what is our new decision about what we're going to do? Because we can't let all these people go, because this is temporary. Whatever the heck it is, we don't know what it is, but we don't know how long it's going to last, but this ain't permanent. Step 3 then is come up with a plan. So you got to make a new decision. Most people won't make a new decision about what they want next in their life. Step 3, make a plan. And maybe this is where coaching comes in, consulting comes in, reaching out to experts. You may not know how to create a plan. That's why you might need a coach. You might need some help. Again, there's plenty of resources, YouTube, Google, all these things. And then once you have a plan, you got to do the 4th thing, which is where people oftentimes, where I find people, is that they failed to execute the plan that either was given to them by someone who was successful at the thing they wanted to do, or they failed in their consistency, or as I said earlier, their patience with the process and their persistence in the process. I tell people all the time, success is boring. It's actually routine and mundane because it's repeating things over and over again over a long period of time. It is not reinventing the wheel every other Thursday.
Yeah, you can give people the formula, but a lot of people are really good at getting started, but not sticking with it long term.
Yeah, because they get started and they hope that it's going to be a magic show in 2 weeks.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not the way it works.
Well, like I said, I could just keep diving into this stuff, but we should probably wind it down a little bit. Why don't we end this way by you letting us know a little bit more about how, if somebody listening to this is excited about what you're talking about here or wants to reach out to you, where can they find you on the World Wide Web?
Easiest place to find me is at my website, darrellevans.net. And from there, you can find all the stuff, my agency, the podcast, all my free seminars and training, all that stuff. Whatever you might need is available as you see fit. So thanks for having me, Matt. It's really been a pleasure. Always talking to another industry veteran it's an easy conversation because there's so much like-mindedness going on in the conversation. Yeah. So I really appreciate your journey and you hosting the time today for this discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Darrell. Till next time. Thanks, Builders Crew. That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. If you want to comment on this episode's page, provide me with requests on topics for future episodes, or inquire about being a guest, please find your way to thebuilders.fm. You can contact me there or add a comment under these show notes. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you are interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.